All right, let's keep moving forward with Core ML. This time we're going to be working with CreateML, but this time not with images. Instead, we are going to be working with text. And so this is a way for us to take a certain chunk of text and say, we think this is X or Y, whatever it is. Some really cool applications I've seen from this is, for example, one research group took a bunch of text messages that people were getting and determining whether or not they were spam. The same thing could be said for like subject lines within an email and trying to determine, is this spam or not? Look for some sort of similarity between these things, and hopefully we'll find something that we can very easily say, hey, this is probably spam and this one's probably not. In our situation, I'm going to walk us through an example of taking a file that has a bunch of different news headlines, and we're going to try to determine whether it's a business article or it's a sports article. So for example, in business, Shell ramps up in Kitimat, raising Canada's $30 billion LNG hopes. Down in sports, Laker news, LeBron James officially signs 4-year contract with LA, right? So the whole idea here is it'd be really cool if we could pass in a particular title to a news story and figure out whether it's a sports or a business news article. And just like with the images, right? In this situation, it's either going to be sports or it's going to be business, but we could do this for all sorts of different categories and have that work. But I'm really just trying to show off how cool Core ML is at making this all happen. So let's go ahead and open up our existing playground. So before we had been working this with the CreateML UI, all that good stuff. In this situation, we're going to be using CreateML, but not the UI part of this. When we're working with the text, this is all done just right here inside of the playground. There's no sort of visual dragging and dropping of everything. And so the first step in order to work with this is we actually have to go get our file from the desktop. And you're wondering, what file you're talking about? Well, anytime you're working with CreateML in a text situation, you're going to have some sort of JSON file. And here's this headlines.json to see what that looks like. I've got that pulled up here. Basically, at the very top, it's just an array of a bunch of dictionaries. And inside of each dictionary, you're going to have, you could have a couple of different things, but you need to essentially have the piece of text and then what defines it. So in my situation, I decided to define this as the title and the category, right? We want to be able to input something like a title and then get back out what category this belongs to. Like this title here, this means business in this situation, okay? So it's just, remember this, one big JSON array with dictionaries inside of here where we have a title and a category. Make sure you get the comma between those two. Again, if you want to make your own version of this, start with the array. Inside of your array, you're going to put like curly brackets like this, and you would say something like title, colon, do some sort of title in there, comma, and then you're going to add something like category, colon, and then you would do something like business, something like that. Now, if we were going to do the spam situation, maybe what we would do is say something like text, like a text that comes through on our phone. We can check that out there. And rather than category, we would call this spam, and then we could either say like yes or no to that, right? There's all sorts of different situations you could apply this to, but I just wanted you to see what that could look like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of this now that you know what this file looks like. And for me, when I did this, I just manually went to a couple of different news websites and I started pulling out this information and plugging it in there. I eventually found a really cool website that had a news API that made this much faster to work with. But back to the situation. So we need to import that JSON file here into the playground. So in order to do some of that, we're going to have to do import foundation to get some Apple code to bring in some files. So what we're going to do is we're going to say ML data table. This is the big thing that we're hoping to create here. So ML data table, do with the opening parentheses, and we want to do this contents of, and so go ahead and just enter this in like this. But in order to do that, it has to have a URL of what we're trying to get. So let's go ahead and make a URL object. Inside of here, we're going to do our file URL with path. So go ahead and select that. And then the string that we're going to provide here is just wherever it is that your file is located. So ours on the desktop, I could manually probably type it out, but I think a really cool way to check this out is this. You open up your terminal, okay, and for example, if I go to my desktop, I'm going to say CD capital desktop. and do an ls, I can see all the different files there. If I do pwd, it's going to show me exactly what was the path to get there. So I can actually just copy this and say, okay, the path that we're getting to is this /users zappy code desktop /, and then I need to get the name of that file exactly. And so I'm actually just going to go in here, select all, copy, paste that in so that I don't have any mistakes that's exactly the name of the file. So with this in place, this is a situation that can throw, so we need to put a try question mark there, and let's just do a little if let. I'm going to say if let text data be equal to this, and I'll go ahead and throw up my curly brackets here. Now if this all pans out, you'll see that this text data that we have is an ML data table. This is what we're going to be using to determine things. Now, just like we had done before with the images, we need to have some training data, and we also need to have some testing data. Now, this was a really awesome hack that I saw from my friend Paul Hudson, and so total credit to him. He's got a great write-up actually on a ton of awesome features in iOS 12, but he showed how you could take your example data that you have here and easily split it into some testing and training data, and you can do it just randomly, which is really great. And so if you take your text data, you can say text data dot random split, and you're going to go here and say by 0.8, meaning you're going to give 80% of this to the training and 20% to testing. That's about what Apple recommends. And then for the seed, just go ahead and pass in the number 2. And what this gives back is a tuple with the information. So if I say let, I'm going to do my parentheses here, and I can put training on one side, training, there we go, and I can also have testing on the other side, right? So that now we have our training, you got to spell this right, ML data table, and we also have our testing data table. Really cool that we could just easily split that. So with that in place, the next thing that we need to do is make a classifier to sort of give a little bit more context about how this information is situated and whatnot. And so we are going to create an ML text classifier. Okay, open parentheses. We want to be able to pass in some training data here, and so we'll go ahead and select this, and we're going to pass in the training data that we had just created there via that tuple. Really cool. But we also want to pass in some more information, and so we actually need a different initializer here. If we go back and do our opening parentheses, we want to be able to pass in some more information, and I believe this is the one here. The problem is my text is so big I can't see. This is what we'll do. I'll go back and put in this training data, but then I'll say comma. The next thing that we're looking for is the text column. I have to manually type this out. But as far as the text column goes, we're going to go ahead and put in something like the title. And then we're also going to go ahead and put in the label column. Okay, and we're going to set that equal to category. Okay, so this creates this ML text classifier, and let's go ahead and we've got a couple of different issues here. First, this is throwing, so we've got to do the try here. I'm going to say if let classifier be equal to this. We'll go ahead and do our curly brackets like that. Let's see. There we go. I think Xcode's happy with that now. So with this in place, the next thing that we're going to do is start doing some evaluating. I do want to touch on real quick, when I said text column and label column here, I was referring to, for example, if we bring back that file that we had on the desktop here. So I'm going to bring up this. Let's go ahead and open it up with Xcode so you can see what it looks like. Right, I'm saying the title is the thing that you should be looking for, and then categories also you should be looking for. It's like the input is the title and the output should be category. That's how we're going to be training this. So for your data set, if it's different from mine, that's how you would have to specify that. Feel free to use my stuff. You can get it in the next lecture as part of the resources, but if you like what you have, you can go ahead and just move forward. So with this in place, let's go ahead and evaluate this. We're going to take our classifier. Then we want to do a dot on this, and then we're going to say evaluation, and we are now going to pass it our testing data. And so that's where we're going to test and make sure that everything's correct here and be able to move forward. Now we want to know, if this all worked out, what the potential, error rate was on all of this. So let's go ahead and take what we have here, this classifier, and we want to get on this the classification error. And so we're going to say dot classification error, and let's just go ahead and print this out. So I'm going to say print, put all of this in some parentheses here so we can go ahead and see what that spits back out to us. Now, with this in place, ultimately what we want to do is we want to be able to turn this into a model, just like we have on our desktop. The bakery classifier, we want to have our own model for the text version of what we're working with here. So in order to do this, we've got to provide some metadata. So we're going to create an ML model metadata, and we're going to pass in all these different options. So author, Nick, short description, news, article, classification, maybe something like that. License, I'll just do nil for that. Version, I'll call this 1.1. Additional, I don't need to pass anything in here, so I'm just going to put nil there. Okay, so let's put this into some metadata here. Okay, once we have that in place, now we're going to write this onto our computer. I'd recommend just putting it maybe the same place that you have this file here, at least somewhere similar. So I'm going to take our classifier, and I'm going to say classifier dot write. Okay, and I'm going to write to file here, although we're going to pass it a URL. So I guess let's actually do this. So I'm going to say to URL, and let's do our URL where we can pass it a string. And what we're going to put inside of here is very close to what we have. I'm going to just copy all of that, paste it in, but I'm going to change the name of this to be, instead of headlines.json, I'm going to have it be headlines.ml model. Okay, so with this all in place, whenever you write this, not only do you have to say where it's going to, but you also have to specify the metadata, which in this case is metadata. Oh, and the name on this should not have a capital D because that's one of the parameters there. But with this all in place, it should look good. Let's see why. Again, we've got to have our little try question mark here. So this throws, so we'll have to do that. But with that in place, I think Xcode is going to be happy with that. And we can go ahead and hit the run button here and see what we get. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time because a lot of the things that we work through here, it's going to have to, bring in that JSON file, sort of work through all the different information there, but it's not too long. And here you can see, boom, look at that. It was able to bring this in here, and it's telling us, okay, first time it went through, it wasn't all that accurate, but then after that, it was really, really accurate. So that was good. When it eventually came down and tested it on its own, so that would be this line of code right here. It actually was 50%, so it didn't do the greatest job of that. So we'll see how well it works in practice. If you ever want to try that again, see if it can't make a better model or whatnot, you can always just rerun that code. But look what we have on the desktop now, this headlines.ml model. Pretty great stuff. And look at the size on this one, 3 kilobytes. Before, this other one, 17 kilobytes. This one, 3 kilobytes. That is pretty impressive. Okay, so with that now, we'll be able to bring this into our own app that will be able to chop up some headlines and tell us whether this thing is for sports or whether it is for business. Okay, we'll go ahead and stop here, and in the next one, we'll make an app just like we did before with our images. I'll see you in the next one.